Hello there, it's Paul Fitzgerald here, and thanks for giving me the privilege to have a chat with you during your busy day. Today we're going to be talking about how you can achieve some key goals in your practice. I'll be showing you how to take action now to put some things in place that will significantly improve the way you run your practice. But let me ask you a question. What if your practice was profitable? What if you had staff that were happy and loved their job? What if you were blessed with patients who love you and what you do, and tell others all about it? Would that give you peace of mind? Would it let you sleep better at night and maybe reduce your risk of burnout, knowing that you're building a legacy and a valuable asset for your long-term future? Or would you love to retire when you want to and not have to practice until you're 80? Well, guess what? If that's got your attention, you're absolutely in the right place. So, who is this for? It's for clinicians who want to improve their practice. It's for practice owners who are tired of staffing issues. It's for professionals who are prepared to learn and improve. And it's also for owners who want to understand and manage their risk. Conversely, who is this not for? It's not for practice owners who are doing just fine. It's certainly not for clinicians who are on track to retire on their own terms. If you're a professional who has no HR issues in your practice, it's not for you. And for those who are not willing to make some positive changes, certainly not for you. So if you're any of those, sign off now, and I wish you the very best of luck. So why am I doing this? I'm looking for some like-minded individuals who want to learn about risk and how to manage it, who want to create a profitable practice, who want to have happy and productive staff, and have patients who love you and tell others how great you are. Now, I don't know if that's you yet, but we'll see. So in the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to show you how to identify risk and then manage it. I'll talk to you about the secrets of managing staff. And guess what? There is no secret sauce, but there are some things you can put in place to make managing your staff an awful lot simpler. And I'll show you 5 ways to reduce your privacy and cyber vulnerabilities. Now here's why you need to know what I know. I've worked in healthcare across multiple settings for over 30 years. I started life as a pharmaceutical rep, calling on doctors and pharmacies, then specialists and hospitals. And during this time, I got to have a first-hand look at how practices run, the good, the bad, and in a few cases the downright ugly. I also worked with medical device companies and then healthcare IT companies. I've run multinational companies and also startups, all in healthcare. Now, I was a senior executive in several of these and then left to work as a consultant to startups, which means I've come across and learned how to fix most of the problems you face on a day-to-day basis. I've got extensive experience in people management. I've hired and fired staff and have managed large and small teams, both directly and remotely. So I know how hard staff can be and how hard it can be to get the right people in the first place, but also just how difficult it can be to get rid of the wrong people. I'm also a cyber and privacy risk expert, especially in regard to healthcare. I've seen and experienced some real shockers when it comes to security, or what sometimes passes for security. So just to allay any fears that you may have about a hard sell, there is nothing for sale today. So you can keep your wallet safely closed. But if you stay until the end, then I have a gift for you that will dramatically change your results when it comes to building a successful and sustainable practice. And I'll also have a way for you to have all your questions answered for free. Now, are you doing things the hard way? Are you constantly chasing cash flow? Is cash flow a constant source of worry for you? Does irregular money flow stop you doing things that you want to do in the practice or in your personal life? Do you have no idea of your risk profile or how to manage it? Have you ever sat down and actually thought about risk in your practice? Now, you have locks on the doors, but do your staff have strong passwords on the computers? Passwords that are changed frequently? Or heaven forbid, does your practice actually share login details? Staffing issues, hiring, firing, performance management pain. Do your staff give you reflux every time you think about them? What about when you come to hiring or firing someone? Is there a formula to do this? Are you at risk of harassment claims or bullying claims within your practice? Would you actually know if this was going on? Is there zero or little marketing or patient engagement happening? Do patients just turn up, sit for long periods of time in your waiting room? Or are they greeted with a smile and a positive vibe when they walk in? Are they engaged and educated? Can they access information relevant to them and their conditions via an online portal or your website? How about the simple act of making an appointment? Can they actually get an urgent appointment if they need one? Or are they simply told, sorry, there's no appointments today? Do you have no advice on how to run your practice as a business? Do you know where to turn for advice? Now, there are thousands of small business consultants out there, but how many actually understand healthcare? It doesn't have to be this way, though. But first you need to understand that you're running a business, not just a practice. As Dr. Corey Schuler says, it doesn't matter how smart a doctor is. If they can't keep the lights on, they can't help anyone. So let me tell you about an easier way. Your practice can run smoothly with staff who are trained and actually enjoy their work. Your staff can be profitable, allowing you to retire on your terms. Your patients can love you and your practice and shout from the rooftops about how great you are. And you can easily understand your risk universe and how to manage it. Now, I should point out that results are not necessarily typical. It is important to understand that results will depend entirely on how you engage with the program and implement what you learn. Now, I can give you all the tools, all the information that you need to improve your practice dramatically, but the future is in your hands. So let me now reveal how to identify risk and then manage it. But let me tell you an interesting story about a clinician who thought he was insured for cyber. Recently, I had a discussion with a medical doctor about privacy, security, insurance, and a number of other things. For the sake of this exercise, let's call him Bob. Bob told me that he thought his insurance cover from his medical defence organisation covered him for cyber liability. I suggested that perhaps it would be worth checking the fine print. Now, the other day, Bob called me in to say that he had checked with the MDO about cyber cover. Now, after this discussion, I immediately thought of two songs that summed it up perfectly. The first was Things That Make You Go, by C&C Music Factory. And the second was How Bizarre by OMC. Now, according to his insurer, Bob is covered for actual or alleged breaches of privacy or confidentiality. However, his policy excluded fines, such as those that may be imposed by the Privacy Commissioner, or damages awarded by the courts, such as in a civil claim, or repayments for Medicare. Now, additionally, there are other exposures like the impact to the practice through interruption and loss of revenue, forensic investigations, remediation costs, which are also not covered by this policy. So what's the potential financial impact for Bob if his practice has a cyber event? Now, Bob could have a regulatory fine imposed by the Privacy Commissioner. He quite possibly may incur damages. And on average, the Privacy Commissioner has awarded around $15,000 to each claimant in recent cases of healthcare data breaches. Under the new mandatory reporting laws that become law in February 2018, just to remedy the breach based on 1,500 compromised patient records, costs could escalate well beyond $1 million. If you add in then fines and damages, then the amount not insured would cost most people their business, their home, and maybe a lot more. So what to do and what needs to be covered? In this case, Bob needs to consider a specific cyber liability policy that is tailored to cover his actual risk and his risk appetite. To do so, Bob first needs to understand his risk profile and financial exposure, including any potential vulnerabilities. Now, something we've encountered in assisting health professionals is that many healthcare practices have informal policies around cyber and privacy security. But these are often just what we do, as opposed to being formally implemented in writing and in practice. Undertaking a risk assessment is likely to provide a much higher probability that you'll be able to obtain cyber insurance and perhaps a discounted premium. Additionally, it will help your practice with any future accreditation requirements, and if you have a breach, it'll help to minimise the fallout because you actually took privacy seriously and proved it by addressing any vulnerabilities. Now, before we get upset, I know everyone really takes privacy seriously, but can you actually prove that to anyone? So, how do you identify risk and manage it? As part of your business planning process, you should identify all areas of risk and create a plan of how you will manage this. It should cover disaster recovery, loss of key staff, medical misadventure, illness on your part, things like that. Now, risk comes in many forms. It can be fire or burglary. It can be staff filing vexatious claims against the practice, or maybe well-founded claims. It may be that your practice is located in a flood zone. Or maybe just the fact that your business partner is a lot older than you could create risk. What if something happened to him or her? Would the practice continue without major impact? Do you have a contract in place that defines what will happen to other people's equity if one of them moves on or dies? You need to establish policies and procedures and ensure your staff are trained properly, and make sure these are written down. Your staff may be very good at what they do, but does your practice have a policies and procedures manual on how to handle a multitude of situations? Are they written down? Usually everyone just gets on and does things, but policies need to be written down so you can point to them and say, we actually enforce these. Just as important is the need to actually train your staff on these policies and procedures. Is there an induction program? Does your practice provide regular staff training to ensure everyone knows about the importance of specimen handling, for example, or the absolute necessity for patient information to be kept private? Review your insurances to make sure you are appropriately insured, especially for any risk that is out of your control. Now, everyone hates to pay insurance, but it is a fact of life that we need it. You should regularly review your insurance coverage. Do you have adequate insurance for fire, flood, all those physical risks? How about key person insurance, income protection, cyber liability? My suggestion is to find a great broker who understands the healthcare market and work with them collaboratively to ensure your risk appetite is married up with the appropriate cover. Also review any specific standards applicable to your practice and ensure that you comply with them. Now, standards are a bit like insurance. We need them, but everyone hates the compliance part. Getting ready for accreditation is a nightmare if you wait till a few weeks before the assessors are due. If you get the practice in order now and maintain a well-run business, the accreditation will in most cases look after itself. As part of your business planning process, you should be reviewing the appropriate accreditation standards to which you need to be accountable. Making subtle changes in the way you work as the standards evolve will be a much more pleasant experience than trying to do a major catch-up every couple of years. So here's how to apply this to your situation. When you understand your risk, you can sensibly manage it, and that means you'll be able to sleep at night. First step is, do you have a business plan? If you don't have a business plan, then how will you know where you're going? And how will you know when you get there? So you do need to have one. If you don't know how to do a plan, there are hundreds of small business consultants out there, and there are thousands of free templates on Google. Either way, you need a plan. In your plan, you need to identify the risks that face your business. Now, there's physical risks, fire, flood, etc. There's also human risks, your own staff, intruders. Did you know that over half of privacy breaches are actually caused by staff? There's a technology risk, a server failure, long-term power outage, that type of thing. What happens if that server that lives under the bench in the staff kitchen gets someone's lunch spilt all over it? Remember, building a successful business is a marathon, not a sprint. So once you've identified the risks in the business, you can then proactively start to manage them. So the first step is to decide your risk appetite. If you have a couple of $1 million sitting in the bank, well, firstly, you probably don't need to be here. But if you did, you may well say, okay, I can self-insure for some of this stuff. It's more likely you don't have that sort of disposable cash, so you will need to decide, either individually or with your business partners, just how much risk is okay. That will be a decision only you can come to, but you do need to consider it. So where possible, eliminate the risk. Perhaps it's as simple as deciding that disaster recovery looks more like having a practice management solution that is hosted in the cloud, so backups and accessibility is more or less guaranteed, as opposed to that server that's in the lunchroom that could wear someone's cup of soup. That means that a possible major risk is no longer a worry and you can move on to the next one. Eliminate things that produce undue risk. So some things are obviously not able to be eliminated, but some can be. If your location is prone to floods, is it an option to relocate? Are you in the middle of a bushfire zone? Again, can you relocate or can you clear some trees? You get the picture. Insure for uncontrollable risk. So once you've decided what you can and must live with, you need to insure for that risk. A good broker can help you through this process. As I said before, use a broker who understands healthcare. So next, the secrets of managing staff. Let's talk about HR. Let me tell you about a practice where bullying was allowed to grow and fester and become a major issue. This practice was a specialist medical practice, where the doctors allowed the practice manager to run the business almost without restraint. She hired, fired, did the banking, all those things that practice managers tend to do. What they didn't realise, and perhaps still don't, is that this practice manager was a bully. She was not the stand over someone and yell in their face type of bully. She was much too clever for that. She was quietly passive-aggressive. She worked on individual staff members to create divisions with other staff members. She would say hello to certain people when they arrived and not to others. She would purposely change rosters or patient bookings without telling the clinicians involved. She was rude to patients. She spent much of her time dealing with personal issues involving her family. After getting several clinical staff to leave of their own accord, she would then set her sights on the next victim. When a key clinical contractor complained about her to the principals, they asked this clinician to document the bullying. Now that's pretty hard to do. How do you document that X didn't say hello this morning but did to everyone else? On paper that looks fairly petty. But it's still bullying. When this clinician complained again, the principals brought in a human relations expert from the AMA to lecture everyone on the practice about just how bad bullying is and not to do it. Nothing happened for a week or two, then the bullying kicked back in with a vengeance, because the practice manager knew exactly who had dobbed her into the principals. They went on their merry way, thinking all was hunky-dory, until late one Thursday afternoon, the clinician in question simply walked into one of the principal's office and resigned on the spot. Patients had to be cancelled the next day, life was in upheaval, and I think that to this day, they still have no idea what really happened. They were very lucky to have avoided legal action against their inaction. So the simple way to manage staff, here's how to do it. Ensure that when you hire, you have a set of criteria to which you manage the interview process. Get help if you need to, for example, a recruiter. You need to have clear and precise position role descriptions, which define the role and the expectations of you and the practice. Be clear on what is and is not allowed. For example, use of personal phones during work hours, use of practice internet to access Facebook and things like that. Be clear and ensure when you hire someone that they actually know this. If you don't know how to do this, use a recruiter. That's their job. The professional bodies that represent your area will also have templates for interviewing and for role descriptions. Set up induction and training programs. When you start someone, make sure you're there on their first day to welcome and show them around the practice. You need to induct the person on fire procedures, accessing information on the network, and other policies and procedures. This could be an hour or a week. That depends on how thorough you want to be. At a minimum, you need to be able to sign off and have them sign off that they've been shown the fire procedures and other policies and procedures. If you don't do this, it could come back to bite you. Imagine, heaven forbid, you have a fire in the practice and that new person who started last week didn't know what to do and was injured or worse. Liability would be swift and costly. Your staff should have regular training provided to keep them up to date. Now this can be a mixture of online or face-to-face, or at least some required reading that provides them with updates or revisions of the practice policies and procedures. Remember, we said these need to be written down. You also need to conduct regular performance reviews and provide feedback to your staff. Staff need and thrive on positive feedback. If you need to give negative feedback, do so in a constructive way. Always try and find a positive. And lastly, if you really don't want to do this or don't know how to do this, outsource it if necessary, but it must be done. How does this apply to you? Let me show you. If your staff have clear policies and procedures that have been trained during induction and regularly thereafter, they will work more productively and be happier. And this flows on to patients. Happy staff, and they will be happy if they know they're treated fairly and given feedback, will look after your interests much better than unhappy staff. If your staff are unhappy, and it is your job to know this, then at best they may put off your patients, but at worst they may actually steal from and sink your business. It's imperative that you interact with your staff. Now by that I don't mean you have to be friends with them and go out for drinks on Friday night, but you do need to know how they're feeling. Induct them, train them, and provide feedback. Now finally, as I promised, I'd like to show you 5 ways to reduce your privacy and cyber vulnerabilities. So here's a story you may find interesting. What happens if you actually have a data breach? Either cyber related or just an oops moment. A healthcare record can fetch up to $50 on the black market. Now this is compared to around $3 for a credit card. You can see why criminals want to get to your data. If the average 2-doctor practice has around 4,000 records, that's big money for the thieves. Now the big difference with a credit card is that if you see inappropriate activity on it, you can call the bank, they cancel the card, everyone moves on and gets on with their lives. You can't do that with a healthcare record because that diagnosis of depression that you had 10 years ago is still there. Your Medicare number is still there. Your date of birth hasn't changed. Your address may not have changed. All that sort of thing. So it's an ongoing live record. And that's why it's worth so much. And with this data, the criminals can pursue insurance fraud and prescription fraud and even just vanilla identity theft. And a worrying and growing trend is the inappropriate access of medical services using someone else's identity. So if your practice has a data breach, the Privacy Commission can fine you up to $1.8 million for a company and up to $350,000 for an individual. On top of this, there is a huge reputational loss, and on average, practices can lose over half of their patients. From February 2018, new legislation is in place that enforces mandatory breach notification. All healthcare practices will be obliged to report any data or privacy breach to the Privacy Commissioner, to AHPRA, and the affected patients themselves. Now this is going to open the Pandora's box of class action litigation. Now the cost of reparation for a breach averages around $350 per record. So again, for the average practice with 4,000 records, that runs to about $1.4 million. Normal practice insurances don't cover this sort of loss. Could your practice survive this? So let me show you how to do it. The first thing is to run a complete risk assessment of the practice. Now, many medical practices adopted electronic health recording systems before there were clear guidelines on what these systems should contain. This means that a practice could be using electronic systems that are not compliant with current standards. To ensure compliance, a risk assessment should be done on the current systems to highlight areas in which compliance is not enforced, and to expose areas in which changes are needed. Ensure the latest version is being used, including any security patches from the vendor. The risk assessment should look at policies and procedures that are in place and manage access to personally identifiable information. Prepare for disaster before it occurs. All data handled by a medical practice should be safe from both loss and corruption. One of the main ways of ensuring data is not lost in case of any mishaps is backing up of medical data daily. Data should be backed up in an off-site location to ensure that in case of incidents such as natural or man-made disasters, the data backup is not destroyed as well. Antivirus programs should be installed on all computers to ensure data is not corrupted or destroyed by computer viruses or held to ransom by cyber criminals. Implement an ongoing employee training program. Any system is only as strong as its weakest link, and in some cases poorly trained employees or temp staff are the entry point for hackers into medical practices. It's also these staff who are more likely to have an oops moment and accidentally release confidential information. A medical practice could have excellent processes and systems, but if the employees don't use passwords to access records and files, the system security is rendered useless. Medical practices should continually train their staff on how to follow the right security protocols and ensure data integrity and security. And purchase medical equipment and products with security compliance and compatibility in mind. If you're buying new equipment for your practice, it should be compatible with existing systems and should offer enough security features. With the advent of connected devices, the so-called Internet of Things, it is critical that devices are secure and kept up to date. Before making any major purchases, review the products thoroughly to ensure both security and compatibility. And finally, collaborate with affected parties. Changes which need to be made to bring about cybersecurity and privacy compliance affect many people in the practice and also people outside the practice. Affected groups should be offered training, and management must ensure that staff understand the importance of compliance to everyone involved in the practice. Also ensure that key staff are trained on what to do in the event of a breach. A comprehensive disaster plan is essential and must be practiced regularly. So if you're wondering how you can use this, here's how. Now, I've conducted numerous risk assessments for healthcare practices both in Australia and overseas. They all had serious flaws in their security, especially how sensitive information is handled and stored. User access to personally identifiable information must be on an as-needs basis. Work on the principle of least access. Make sure passwords are strong and regularly changed. Make sure all backups are encrypted, both at rest and in transit, and store them off-site in a secure environment. Your practice manager's handbag is not appropriate. So these organisations all fixed the issues that were identified, and it helped them with accreditation and in many cases reduce their insurance premiums. So at the outset, I promised you that I'd teach you 3 things today. The first one was how to identify risk and then manage it. The second was the secrets to managing staff. And the third was to show you 5 ways to reduce your privacy and cyber vulnerabilities. So, how do you think I went? Now here's the real opportunities I see for you. You can have a high-performing practice with happy staff leading to happy patients. By making some changes and actively running your practice as a business, you can have happy staff and patients who love you and your practice. You can have a clear picture of your risk universe and be able to manage that, leading to peace of mind, not to mention better mental health. By managing risk, you can be more profitable, meaning an exit at your pace. And many practices are being bought up by corporates. If you have a well-run business, you will optimise your return. With the corporatisation of healthcare practices going on, well-managed, profitable practices will attract a premium price, should you choose to sell. The corporates will not be in a position to come to you and offer to bail you out, so you can become one of their employees on the hamster wheel. So the good news is it's not about whether you have the complete ability to do this now. It's about whether you can take one step now and learn the rest as you go along with some help. What do you need to win in this healthcare business? Well, the first thing you need is the right plan. The second thing is the right systems. And you just need some help to get you along the way. So what now? You've got a choice to make. You can click away and forget everything I've just told you. That's fine. But it also means you go back to your old results. But if you really want to change things, you can change by doing something different. And that's how I can help. So congratulations, here's the gift I promised you at the start of the class. I've set aside some time in the next 48 hours to speak to 15 people only about how you can apply these ideas to your life starting today. Whatever your biggest problem is, I can help you solve it. On a 45-minute call, I will help you in 3 ways. First, I'll talk to you about your biggest challenge that's occurring right now. Second, I'll help you solve it. And third, I'll set out a step-by-step plan as to how you can reach your end goal without all the issues you currently face in your practice. So just a reminder who this is for. It's for clinicians who want to improve their practice. It's for practice owners who are tired of staffing issues. It's for professionals who are prepared to learn and improve. And it's for owners who want to understand and manage their risk. Now, if you can say yes to all of this, then I'm happy to help you for free during a 45-minute strategy call. Now, why do I do this? Well, if we can make a connection and you're absolutely positive I can help you achieve your goals, then you may want to apply to work with me. If it's a win-win for both of us, that's fantastic. If it's not, that's no issue at all. So click the button you see now. There's a 48-hour window available only for 15 people, and this button will take you to my online calendar where you can set up a time that suits you to have me call you. And just to refresh, once you click the button, we'll set up a 45-minute call in which I will help you in 3 ways. I'll talk to you about your biggest challenge that's happening right now. I'll help you solve it. And I'll set out a step-by-step plan as to how you can reach your end goal without all the issues you currently face in your practice. So click on the button, make a decision to make a positive change, and I look forward to chatting with you very soon.